Code Blue Karma. I sat across from Mom at her kitchen table, my hands shaking as I tried to find the right words. The doctor's voice still echoed in my head from that morning. Autoimmune disease. Possibly lupus. We needed more tests, but the symptoms matched perfectly. The fatigue that felt like drowning, the joint pain that woke me up screaming, the rashes that appeared without warning. Mom, Dr. Chen thinks something is seriously wrong with me, I said quietly. She didn't look up from her phone. Her thumbs kept scrolling, her face bathed in blue light. I waited, feeling smaller with each passing second. Mom? I heard you, Emma. She sighed like I'd asked her to solve a complicated math problem. You're always so dramatic about everything. My chest tightened. I'm not being dramatic. I can barely get out of bed most mornings. The pain is... Everyone gets tired, she interrupted, finally looking at me. Her eyes were cold, annoyed. You're 26 years old. Maybe if you ate better or exercised more, you wouldn't feel so run down. I opened my mouth to argue, but she was already standing up, dismissing me with a wave of her hand. You always want attention, Emma. Always. I left her house feeling hollow. My phone rang 2 hours later. It was the hospital. The message came through at 12:47 a.m. I was still awake, staring at my bedroom ceiling, replaying Mom's words over and over. My phone buzzed, and I grabbed it quickly. The patient portal notification made my stomach drop. Test results available. I clicked with trembling fingers. The words swam in front of my eyes. Positive markers. Elevated inflammation. Systemic lupus erythematosus confirmed. The report went on for 3 pages, each paragraph worse than the last. Kidney involvement. Recommendation for immediate treatment. High-risk category. I sat in my car in the driveway, even though I was already home. I needed the small space, the feeling of being contained while everything inside me fell apart. The dome light made everything feel surreal, like I was watching myself in a movie. My first instinct was to call Mom, to show her I wasn't dramatic or attention-seeking, to prove that the pain was real. But my finger hovered over her contact, and I couldn't press it. Then I noticed something strange in the portal. My medical records showed that someone else had been given access to my account 3 days ago. Someone had already seen my test orders. The authorization had my mother's email address. She knew I was being tested. She knew, and she still called me dramatic. My cousin Riley texted me on Tuesday afternoon. Just 3 words, you need to see this. The screenshots arrived one after another. Family group chat messages. Mom's words in black and white, shared with aunts, uncles, cousins I barely spoke to anymore. Emma is faking sick again to get out of work responsibilities. She's always been lazy. Don't believe anything she says about doctors. She's shopping for diagnoses. I'm worried she's becoming a hypochondriac. She needs therapy, not medical tests. Each message felt like a punch. I read them twice, 3 times, unable to believe my own mother had written these things. The dates went back weeks. She'd been doing this long before I even told her about Dr. Chen's concerns. Riley's final text came with another screenshot. I'm sorry, Em. I thought you should know what she's been saying. This message was different. It wasn't in the family chat. It was a private conversation between Mom and someone named Janet. Emma's performance at work has been slipping because of her mystery illness. I told Janet from her office that she might want to keep an eye on the situation. My blood went cold. Janet was my manager. Janet, who had been Mom's college roommate 30 years ago. Janet, who still met Mom for lunch twice a month. My mother had contacted my workplace. I started digging. It wasn't hard once I knew what to look for. Mom's LinkedIn showed her consulting connection to Morrison & Partners, my company. She'd done HR consulting for them 5 years ago, right before I was hired. I found an email in my work inbox from 3 weeks earlier, CC'd to Janet and HR. The subject line read, Wellness Check Protocol. I deleted it without reading it, thinking it was another corporate policy update. I searched my trash folder with shaking hands. The email outlined new procedures for monitoring employees who showed signs of instability or unreliability. It mentioned increased sick day usage, decreased productivity, and attention-seeking behavior regarding personal health matters. The language felt familiar. Too familiar. I checked the sent date against my calendar. It was 2 days after I'd called out sick, the day the pain had been so bad I couldn't hold a coffee cup without crying. The same day I'd emailed Janet to explain I had a doctor's appointment scheduled. Mom had been planting seeds for weeks, maybe months. Every time I mentioned feeling unwell, every time I left work early for a medical appointment, she'd been building a narrative. Not to family, to my employer. My phone buzzed. Calendar notification, HR meeting, tomorrow at 2 p.m. Performance review, unexpected evaluation. I hadn't been scheduled for a review. My annual wasn't due for 4 more months. Janet's smile didn't reach her eyes when I walked into the conference room. 2 HR representatives sat beside her, Marcus from Employee Relations and Sandra from Legal. My stomach twisted. "Emma, thanks for making time," Janet said, gesturing to the empty chair across from them. The table felt like a courtroom bench. Sandra opened a folder. "We wanted to discuss some concerns about your recent performance and reliability." Concerns. I tried to keep my voice steady. "My last review is excellent. I exceeded all my targets. That was 6 months ago." Marcus leaned forward. "We've noticed a pattern of increased absences, missed deadlines, and what several colleagues have described as erratic behavior." Erratic? The word stung. "I've been dealing with a medical condition, which you haven't provided documentation for," Janet interrupted. "Multiple sick days without proper medical notes. Vague explanations. It's created concerns about your commitment." I stared at her. We'd had coffee 2 weeks ago. I'd told her about the testing, about waiting for results. She'd seemed sympathetic. "I was diagnosed with lupus," I said quietly. "Last night. It's in my medical records." "We're not questioning your health," Sandra said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "We're addressing performance issues that predate any diagnosis." Missed meetings. Incomplete reports. Several team members have expressed concerns about picking up your slack. They had examples ready. Dates, times, specific projects. But half of them were wrong. Meetings I'd attended. Reports I'd submitted on time. They'd twisted everything, reframed my entire work history through a lens of incompetence. "We're placing you on a 90-day performance improvement plan," Janet said. "Effective immediately." I walked out 40 minutes later, my career in ruins. As I passed Janet's office, I heard laughter. Her voice, bright and amused, talking on the phone. No, she completely fell apart. "You were right about her." I stopped defending myself. It was that simple and that hard. When colleagues asked about the meeting, I smiled and said it was productive. When Janet assigned me impossible deadlines, I documented them in detailed emails, asking for clarification on priorities and resources. I stopped explaining my illness, stopped mentioning doctor's appointments. Instead, I started keeping records. Every email, every assignment, every interaction. I created folders organized by date and person. I noted inconsistencies, projects Janet claimed I'd missed that I'd actually completed weeks early, meetings she said I'd skipped that I had calendar confirmations for. Silence became my strategy. I stopped reacting, stopped defending, stopped engaging with the narrative they'd built. And in that silence, I started noticing things I'd been too panicked to see before. The company finances were publicly posted each quarter. I'd never paid much attention before, but now I had time. Lots of time, since they'd removed me from major projects. I pulled up the last 2 years of reports. Revenue projections versus actual earnings. Budget allocations versus departmental spending. Something was off. Not obvious, just small discrepancies that didn't quite add up. Numbers that shifted between preliminary reports and final filings. Expenses that appeared in one document and vanished from another. Client payments that seemed inflated in internal memos but reduced in official statements. Someone was manipulating the numbers. And they were doing it carefully, buried in legitimate-looking paperwork that most people would never question. I dug deeper. The name that kept appearing on approval signatures made me stop breathing. The consulting invoices went back 3 years. Morrison and Partners paid Westfield Consulting Group $15,000 monthly for HR advisory services and strategic planning. The contract renewal forms were signed each year by Janet and countersigned by our CFO. But when I cross-referenced the actual consulting reports, the ones filed with accounting, only about half showed any real deliverables. The rest were vague summaries of ongoing advisory, with no specific projects, no measurable outcomes, no actual work product. Westfield Consulting Group was owned by my mother. I sat in the empty break room at 7 p.m., my laptop screen glowing, my hands frozen on the keyboard. Mom had been collecting $180,000 annually for services that barely existed. But that wasn't the worst part. The budget manipulations I'd noticed weren't random. They all connected to departments where Mom's consulting was supposedly happening. Money allocated for team training that never occurred. Strategic planning sessions that were never scheduled. Advisory services that left no paper trail except for invoices and payments. My mother was defrauding the company, and Janet was helping her do it. I thought about going to HR, but Sandra was already part of the machine that had put me on probation. I thought about going to the CFO, but his signature was on half these documents. If I exposed this, I'd be going against everyone with power. A sick woman on probation accusing senior leadership of fraud. They'd destroy me. But if I stayed quiet, I was complicit. And they'd already shown me they'd throw me away the moment I became inconvenient. I forwarded everything to my personal email. Then I made 3 USB backups and hid them in different locations. The spreadsheet laid it out clearly. 3 years, 36 months of payments, $540,000 total. For consulting work that existed mostly on paper. Mom's name was on every invoice. Her signature on every contract. Her company logo on every statement of work. The woman who'd laughed at my diagnosis, who'd called me dramatic and attention-seeking, had been stealing from my employer while simultaneously destroying my reputation there. She'd convinced them I was unreliable right as I was getting close to financial records she couldn't afford to have scrutinized. The timeline made sickening sense now. My performance review wasn't random. It came exactly 2 weeks after I'd been assigned to assist with quarterly budget reconciliation, a project that would have given me access to consulting expenses. Janet had reassigned me the next day, citing my current challenges. The project went to someone else, someone who wouldn't question why Westfield Consulting Group had no actual consulting deliverables. I'd been removed because I was getting too close. The illness narrative was just convenient cover. Now I had proof of fraud. But confronting Mom would alert her that someone knew. Confronting Janet would do the same. The moment they realized I'd found the discrepancies, they'd move to protect themselves. Evidence would disappear. Records would be altered. I'd be fired, discredited, and possibly accused of the very fraud I'd discovered. I needed to be smarter, quieter, more patient than they expected me to be. So I did something they'd never anticipate from someone they considered broken. I started planning my exit on my own terms. I called Mom on Saturday morning. My voice shook, not fake, because I was genuinely terrified of what I was about to do, but I leaned into it. "You were right," I said softly. "About everything." Silence on her end. Then, carefully, "What do you mean?" "Work, the diagnosis, all of it." "I've been overreacting." The words tasted like poison. "The lupus is manageable with medication." I think I just panicked and made everything worse for myself. "Oh, sweetheart." Her voice warmed immediately. "I'm glad you're finally seeing things clearly." I talked to Janet. I apologized for my performance issues. I forced tears into my voice. "I'm going to do better. I'm sorry I made you worry." "That's very mature of you, Emma." She sounded pleased, almost smug. "Sometimes we need to face hard truths about ourselves. This is good growth." We talked for 20 more minutes. She gave me advice about managing my career, about not letting my health anxieties define me. I agreed with everything. I thanked her for her honesty. When I hung up, I felt sick. But I also felt clear. That afternoon, I updated my resume. That evening, I applied to 3 positions at Hartman Enterprises, Morrison & Partners' biggest competitor. One of the roles was in financial compliance and internal auditing. I'd spent 6 years building expertise in corporate finance. I knew Morrison's processes inside and out. I understood their client base, their market strategies, their operational weaknesses. I knew where all their bodies were buried, including the ones with my mother's name on them. Hartman's recruiter called me Tuesday morning. They wanted an interview by Friday. The Hartman Enterprises building was glass and steel, 3 blocks from Morrison and Partners. During my interview, I could almost see my old office from the conference room window. "Your experience is impressive," said Michael Torres, the director of financial operations. "But I have to ask, why are you leaving Morrison? You've been there 6 years." I'd practiced this answer 100 times. I'm looking for an environment that values thoroughness and accountability. I've noticed some practices at my current company that concern me from a compliance perspective. His eyebrows rose. "What kind of practices?" "The kind I'd be comfortable discussing with my new employer's legal team if I'm the right fit for this role." I held his gaze. "I believe in doing things correctly, even when it's uncomfortable." He studied me for a long moment. Then he smiled. "We do extensive background checks. You should know that up front." I'd expect nothing less. They called me back for a second interview the next day. This time, there were 4 people in the room, including someone from their legal department. They asked detailed questions about Morrison's financial processes, about internal controls, about how documentation was managed. I answered everything carefully, never quite crossing the line into revealing confidential information, but making it clear I understood exactly how things worked and what could go wrong. "You mentioned compliance concerns," the lawyer said. "Would you be willing to discuss those in detail if we brought you on board?" "If I join Hartman, my loyalty would be to this company," I said. "But I also believe that fraud hurts everyone in an industry. If I had information about practices that violated legal or ethical standards, yes, I'd be willing to share that with appropriate parties." They offered me the job before I left the building. Senior financial analyst with a focus on internal controls and audit support. A 20% raise. Full health benefits that specifically covered chronic conditions. "We value employees who speak up about problems," Michael said as I signed the offer letter. "That includes supporting your health needs. We've noted your lupus diagnosis. You'll have accommodations, flexible scheduling, and no questions asked about medical appointments." For the first time in months, someone believed me, protected me, valued me. "Would you ever be willing to testify?" the lawyer asked quietly, "if information you provided led to legal action?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. I gave Morrison and Partners exactly 2 weeks' notice. Professional, brief, grateful for the opportunities. Janet seemed surprised but not particularly concerned. "I hope this new position works out for you," she said, her smile tight. "Given your recent performance issues." "I appreciate your feedback," I replied, my voice neutral. It helped me understand where I needed to grow. Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. Every day, I went to work and played the role of defeated employee who'd learned her lesson. I completed my transition documentation. I smiled at people who'd whispered about me. I thanked Janet for her mentorship. And every night, I gathered more evidence. Email chains I'd been CC'd on that showed consulting approvals. Financial reports I still had access to. Meeting notes that referenced Westfield consulting projects that never materialized. I organized everything chronologically. I created summaries. I built a timeline that showed the pattern clearly: fake consulting projects, inflated invoices, budget manipulations that hid the discrepancies. Mom called me 3 times that week. She was cheerful, chatty, asking about my new job. "It's good you're making a fresh start," she said. "Sometimes we just need a change of scenery." "You're right," I agreed. "Sometimes we need to see things from a different angle." She had no idea what angle I meant. On my last day, Janet took me to lunch. "No hard feelings about the performance plan," she said over salad. "You understand it was necessary." "Of course," I said. "You were protecting the company." "Exactly." She smiled. "Between you and me, your mother's been worried about you. I'm glad you're getting back on track." "Mom's been very involved," I said carefully. "She cares a lot about Morrison's success." "She's been invaluable to us," Janet agreed. That night, Mom left me a voice message. I almost deleted it without listening, but something made me press play. "Hi Emma, it's me. I'm so relieved you're doing better. I told Janet from the beginning that we needed to handle your situation carefully. I couldn't let you embarrass yourself or damage the company. Sometimes tough love is the kindest option. Anyway, I'm proud of you for... The message cut off. 5 seconds later, another one arrived. Sorry, wrong number. That was meant for Janet. Ignore that. Love you. But it was too late. I'd already heard everything. Her own voice, admitting she'd orchestrated my professional destruction. Her own words, revealing the plan. I saved both messages. I backed them up in 3 separate cloud accounts. Then I forwarded them to my personal email with the subject line, Evidence. Keep secure. The recording was even more damning when I listened with fresh ears. Mom hadn't just admitted to manipulating my performance review. She'd revealed the strategy. Handle your situation carefully. Couldn't let you embarrass yourself or damage the company. She'd positioned herself as protecting Morrison from me, as if I were the threat. I had her voice now, her admission, her own words proving she'd deliberately sabotaged me under the guise of corporate loyalty and maternal concern. But there was more on my phone I'd forgotten about. Voice memos from months ago, when I'd started recording our conversations after she'd denied saying things I clearly remembered. Gaslight insurance, I'd called it. I scrolled through them. There, a conversation from 8 weeks ago, right after I'd told her about my initial symptoms. Emma, you need to stop this health obsession. It's affecting your work. I mentioned to Janet that you might be struggling. She asked me to consult on some team wellness initiatives, so I can keep an eye on the situation. Don't worry, I'm protecting you. Protecting me by creating a paper trail of my supposed instability while billing the company for fake consulting work. Another recording from 6 weeks ago. The performance improvement plan isn't punishment, it's structure. Janet and I agree you need clear boundaries. This is for your own good. She'd known about the PAP before I did, because she'd helped design it. I had 3 recordings total. Each one showed premeditation, planning, coordination between Mom and Janet to build a narrative that justified both my professional destruction and the continued consulting payments. I made encrypted backups on 2 different cloud services. I put copies on USB drives. I emailed them to my new work account with instructions to forward to legal if anything happened to me. Then I started my first day at Hartman Enterprises, carrying the weight of secrets that could destroy the 2 people who'd tried to destroy me first. Morrison and Partners started unraveling in week 3 of my departure. It wasn't dramatic, just small things falling through cracks that I'd apparently been filling without anyone noticing. My replacement struggled with the budget reconciliation process. Monthly financial reports were delayed. Client invoices had errors that took days to correct. The smooth operation I'd maintained for years revealed itself to be dependent on institutional knowledge that couldn't be easily transferred in a 2-week transition. I heard about it through former colleagues who'd stayed in touch. They texted me questions at first. How did you track consulting expenses? Where did you keep the override codes for the payment system? I helped where I could, but I didn't volunteer information they didn't ask for. I certainly didn't mention what I'd found in those consulting records. By week 5, Morrison had missed 2 major financial filing deadlines. The delays triggered automatic reviews with several of their largest clients. Janet was reportedly working 70-hour weeks trying to reconstruct processes that I'd made look effortless. Then came the email that made my breath catch. A former coworker sent it at 11 p.m. FYI, company just announced an internal audit. External firm coming in to review all financial processes and vendor contracts. Janet looks stressed. An external audit would find everything. The inflated consulting invoices. The projects with no deliverables. The budget manipulations that hid the discrepancies. Westfield Consulting Group's 3-year, $500,000 fraud. I hadn't triggered the audit. I hadn't said a word to anyone outside Hartman. But my absence had exposed the fragility of Morrison's operations, and someone higher up had noticed. The system was investigating itself. All I had to do was wait. Mom's call came on a Wednesday afternoon. I was in a meeting at Hartman, my phone face down on the conference table. When I saw her name on my screen during the break, my stomach clenched. Emma, hi. Her voice was different. Tighter. Less certain. How are you? I'm well, thanks. I kept my tone light, professional. Just at work. Right, your new job. How's that going? She was stalling. It's great. Really good culture here. That's wonderful. A pause. Listen, I wanted to ask you something. Do you still have access to any Morrison files? Any documentation from your old projects? There it was. No, I turned everything in during my exit. Why? Oh, just curious. They're going through some internal review process, and Janet mentioned they're having trouble reconstructing some of the financial tracking you used to do. I thought maybe if you had old spreadsheets or something. I don't keep company files after I leave, I said calmly. That would be a policy violation. Of course, of course. I just thought. She trailed off. Emma, have they contacted you? Morrison's audit team. Why would they contact me? No reason. Just wondering if you'd heard anything about what they're looking at. Janet's been so stressed, and I hate seeing her worried. For the first time in our entire relationship, I heard fear in my mother's voice. Real, genuine fear. I'm sure it's just standard procedure, I said. Internal audits happen all the time. Right. Standard. She didn't sound convinced. If anyone does contact you, maybe you could let me know? Just so I can prepare Janet for any questions. I don't think that would be appropriate, I said softly. If auditors contact me, I'll answer their questions honestly. That's all I can do. Silence. Then, quietly, Emma, please. This is important. I'm sorry, Mom. I have to get back to my meeting. I hung up before she could respond. Then I forwarded the entire call recording to Hartman's legal team with a simple subject line. Morrison and partners, subject attempting to influence potential witness. They'd told me to document everything. So I did. The video went public on a Friday morning at 8 a.m. I was getting coffee when my phone exploded with notifications. An anonymous whistleblower package had been uploaded to a public document sharing site. Hundreds of pages of financial records, email chains, and invoices, all meticulously organized and annotated. The consulting fraud laid out in clear, undeniable detail. But the most damaging part wasn't the documents. It was the audio files embedded in the package. Voice recordings of my mother admitting to manipulating my performance review. Messages between her and Janet coordinating the narrative about my reliability. Conversations about managing the budget reports to hide the consulting payment discrepancies. Her own voice. Her own words. Public for anyone to hear. Morrison and Partners stock dropped 12% before noon. By 2 p.m., their largest client had suspended all contracts pending investigation. By 4 p.m., 3 major investors had called for board resignations. I sat at my desk at Hartman, watching the news spread across financial blogs and social media. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. I hadn't uploaded the package myself. But 2 weeks earlier, I'd provided everything to Hartman's legal team, who'd passed it to their outside counsel, who'd apparently made the decision that public disclosure was in the interest of industry accountability. I'd been advised this might happen. I'd agreed it was the right thing to do. My phone rang. Mom. I didn't answer. She called 4 more times. Then Janet called. Then Sandra from HR. Then a number I didn't recognize. I blocked them all and went back to work. My manager stopped by my desk at 5 p.m. You okay? Michael asked quietly. I'm fine, I said. And I meant it. Legal wants you to know you're protected. Anything you need, security, legal support, counseling, just ask. Thank you. He nodded and left. My phone buzzed again. Not a call this time, an email from Morrison's legal team. Subject line, urgent, request for interview. I forwarded it to Hartman's lawyers without reading beyond the first line. The truth was out there now. Nothing I said or didn't say would change it. The email from Sandra came Monday morning. Formal, carefully worded, desperately professional. Dear Emma, we would like to request your testimony regarding financial processes during your tenure at Morrison and Partners. Your insights would be invaluable to our internal investigation. Invaluable. 2 weeks ago, I'd been incompetent and unreliable. Now I was invaluable. Janet sent a separate message an hour later. Emma, I hope you're well. I'd love to grab coffee and talk about what's happening. I think there are misunderstandings we could clear up. You've always been such a dedicated employee. I'd hate for you to get caught up in something that might damage your reputation. The threat was barely veiled. Cooperate with us, or we'll make you look complicit. I deleted both emails without responding. Hartman's legal team had already advised me not to communicate directly with Morrison. Anything I needed to say would go through proper channels, their lawyers, investigators, potentially court proceedings. But other people from Morrison reached out too. Marcus from HR apologized for any misunderstandings during the performance review process. A colleague I'd barely spoken to asked if I'd really meant to destroy people's lives over paperwork issues. My old cubicle neighbor begged me to clarify that she hadn't known anything about the fraud. Only one message made me pause. It came from Thompson, the CFO whose signature had been on many of the consulting approval forms. I need to speak with you urgently. Not about testimony, about what really happened. Please call me. I almost responded. But then I remembered, his signature approved fake projects. Even if he hadn't known, he'd been negligent. Willfully blind at best, complicit at worst. I drafted a response to Sandra instead, CCing Hartman's legal team. Thank you for reaching out. I will cooperate fully with proper investigative authorities. However, I must decline any informal interviews or meetings with Morrison personnel. Please direct all requests through appropriate legal channels. Professional. Clean. Final. Janet called me 12 times that day. I didn't pick up once. The email arrived in Mom's inbox at 9:47 a.m. on Tuesday. I know because she forwarded it to me 3 minutes later with one word. Why? Dear Ms. Westfield, effective immediately, Morrison and Partners is terminating our consulting agreement with Westfield Consulting Group. This decision is final and non-negotiable. Outstanding invoices will not be processed. We will be seeking recovery of funds for services determined to be fraudulent. Legal proceedings may follow. No warning. No meeting. No chance to defend herself or spin the narrative. Just done. 3 years of income, gone in one paragraph. Her reputation in corporate consulting, destroyed. The professional network she'd spent decades building, irreparably damaged. She called me. I let it go to voicemail. Emma, please, I need to talk to you. This is all a misunderstanding. Those recordings are out of context. I was trying to protect you, to help you. Please call me back. Please. She texted, I'm your mother. You can't do this to me. Then, I know you're angry, but this is too far. Then, people make mistakes. I said things I didn't mean. But you've ruined my career. I read each message without emotion. She'd said those things. She'd meant them. The recordings were perfectly clear. My doorbell rang at 7 p.m. I checked the security camera and felt my breath catch. Mom stood on my porch, her car parked in my driveway. Her hair was disheveled. Her makeup smudged. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. She rang the bell again. Then knocked. Then called my phone while standing at my door. I know you're in there, Emma. Your car is here. Please. I just need 5 minutes. I watched her through the camera. Watched her shoulders shake. Watched her press her palms against my door like she could push through it by will alone. Part of me wanted to open it. The part that remembered being a child who'd loved her mother unconditionally. The part that had always believed she'd eventually choose me. But she'd made her choice. Over and over. At her kitchen table when she called me dramatic. In the family group chat when she called me a liar. In her office when she helped destroy my career. I didn't open the door. She stood there for 20 minutes before leaving. She came back the next morning. This time I opened the door. Mom looked awful. No makeup, hair pulled back messily, wearing yesterday's clothes. Her eyes were red and swollen. Thank you, she whispered. Can I come in? I stepped aside. She walked to my living room and sat on the edge of my couch, her hands twisted together. I'm sorry. Her voice cracked. Emma, I'm so sorry. I never meant for things to go this far. I sat across from her, silent. I was wrong. Tears spilled down her cheeks. About everything. About dismissing your illness. About what I said to Janet. About the consulting work. I got caught up in the money and the prestige, and I lost sight of what mattered. She was saying everything I dreamed of hearing for months. The apology. The admission. The tears. But something felt hollow about it. When did you realize you were wrong? I asked quietly. What? When did you realize you'd made a mistake? When I told you about my diagnosis. When you saw the test results. When you heard how much pain I was in. She opened her mouth, closed it. Emma. Or was it when Morrison fired you? I continued. When the recordings went public. When your career fell apart. That's not fair. Answer the question. My voice was steady. When did you realize you were wrong about me? She looked at the floor. I don't know what you want me to say. The truth, I said. For once, just tell me the truth. She wiped her eyes. I needed you to believe me. About the misunderstanding, about my intentions. I thought if I apologized, if I came here and showed you I was sorry. You could fix this, I finished. You could make me tell the investigators it was all a mistake. That I misunderstood the recordings. Her silence was confirmation. Mom, I said softly. Why did you laugh at my diagnosis? She looked up confused. What? That day at your kitchen table. When I told you the doctor thought something was seriously wrong. You laughed. Called me dramatic. I leaned forward. Why? She stared at me for a long moment. I watched her face shift through emotions, confusion, then memory, then something like shame. I didn't laugh. You did, I said. Right before you dismissed me and went back to your phone. I didn't mean, she stopped. Tried again. You're always so sensitive about everything. I have lupus, Mom. An autoimmune disease that could kill me if untreated. And you laughed. I didn't know it was that serious, she protested. You didn't explain. You didn't ask. My voice stayed calm. You didn't look up from your phone. You didn't care enough to listen. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. We sat in silence while the truth settled between us like dust. She had no excuse. No explanation that would make sense. She dismissed me because my pain was inconvenient. Because acknowledging my illness would have required her to see me as a person rather than a problem. I'm your mother, she finally whispered. You are, I agreed. And that's why this hurts so much. More silence. Then she stood up, her movements slow and defeated. What do you want from me, Emma? I want you to leave. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Please don't do this. I know I made mistakes, but I'm still your mother. You can't just throw me away. I'm not throwing you away, I said. I'm protecting myself. The same way you claimed you were protecting me when you destroyed my career. Emma. Goodbye, Mom. She walked to the door, then turned back one last time. If you testify against me, you'll regret this. They'll twist everything. Make you look vindictive. And there it was. Not remorse. Not love. Just self-preservation. I'll tell the truth, I said. That's all I've ever wanted to do. She left without another word. I closed the door gently, then locked it. The silence that followed was the most peaceful thing I'd felt in months. The federal investigation started in week 8. What had begun as Morrison's internal audit had uncovered evidence of wire fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit got involved. I received a subpoena in mid-November. Federal agents wanted my testimony about the consulting scheme, the falsified records, and the coordination between Mom and Morrison's management. Hartman's legal team prepared me for 3 full days. They explained what prosecutors would ask, what defense attorneys might try, what I should and shouldn't say. They reminded me that I'd broken no laws. I was a witness, not a subject of investigation. Mom faced criminal charges. Wire fraud carries 20 years maximum. Janet faced charges too, along with Thompson the CFO and 2 other executives who'd approved the fake consulting payments. Are you ready for this? Michael asked me the day before my testimony. Once you're in that courtroom, there's no taking it back. I've been ready since the night she called me dramatic, I said. The courthouse was cold gray stone and harsh fluorescent lighting. I wore a simple navy suit and my most comfortable shoes. The lupus made standing painful, and I didn't know how long I'd be there. Mom was in the gallery. I saw her as I walked to the witness stand. She looked smaller, older, broken. She met my eyes once, then looked away. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor was a woman in her 50s named Sandra Martinez. She smiled at me kindly. Ms. Westfield, can you describe your relationship with the defendant? She's my mother, I said clearly. And did you work at Morrison and Partners? Yes, for 6 years as a financial analyst. During that time, were you aware of your mother's consulting relationship with the company? I became aware of it gradually, I said. I knew she did some consulting work, but I didn't understand the full extent until I investigated. For the next 2 hours, I walked through everything. The diagnosis, the dismissal, the family messages, the performance review, the discovery of fraudulent invoices, the recordings. I spoke calmly, factually, without emotion. I presented emails, financial records, timeline documentation. I explained how the numbers didn't add up, how the consulting projects had no deliverables, how Mom and Janet had coordinated to both commit fraud and silence me when I got too close. Mom's lawyer tried to shake me during cross-examination. Isn't it true you were angry at your mother for not believing your medical condition? Yes. And you wanted revenge? No. I wanted the truth. You destroyed her career over a family disagreement. I documented fraud, I corrected. The destruction of her career was a consequence of her choices, not mine. The questioning went on, but I'd prepared. I stayed calm. I stuck to facts. Finally, the judge asked me one last question. Ms. Westfield, what motivated you to come forward with this information? I looked at the judge, then at Mom, then back at the judge. It was never about revenge, I said slowly. I want to be clear about that. When I first discovered the fraud, I was angry, of course I was. My mother had dismissed my diagnosis, sabotaged my career, and stolen from my employer. Anyone would be angry. The courtroom was silent. But anger wasn't what made me come forward. It was survival. Every time I stayed quiet about what I knew, I became more complicit. More trapped in a system that had already shown me I was disposable. I glanced at Mom. She was crying silently. The recordings, the documents, the evidence, I didn't gather those things to hurt her. I gathered them to protect myself. Because I learned that when you're sick, when you're vulnerable, when people with power decide you're inconvenient, you need proof. You need documentation. You need truth. And coming forward, the judge prompted, was about dignity, I said. About refusing to be erased. About believing that what happened to me mattered, even if my own mother didn't think so. I took a breath. My mother once told me I always wanted attention. She was right, in a way. I wanted someone to pay attention to my pain, to my illness, to the truth. I wanted to be seen as a person who deserved basic respect and honesty. So no, I concluded. This wasn't revenge. This was me refusing to disappear just because it would be more convenient for everyone else if I did. The judge nodded slowly. Thank you, Ms. Westfield. You may step down. I walked past Mom on my way out. She reached for my hand, but I kept walking. There was nothing left to say. The verdict came 6 weeks later, guilty on all counts. Mom was sentenced on a cold Tuesday in January. I wasn't required to attend, but I went anyway. I needed to see it through to the end. The judge read the charges methodically. Wire fraud. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Tax evasion. Each count carried weight, carried consequences. Janet got 5 years and had to repay $127,000 in fraudulent payments she'd approved. Thompson got 3 years for negligent oversight. 2 other executives got probation and fines. Mom got 7 years and full restitution of $540,000. 7 years. She was 61. She'd be 68 when she got out. Does the defendant wish to make a statement? The judge asked. Mom stood slowly. Her lawyer had told her what to say. I could tell from how carefully she'd prepared the words. Your Honor, I take full responsibility for my actions. I betrayed the trust of my colleagues, my clients, and most importantly, my daughter. Her voice shook. I let greed and ego cloud my judgment. I hurt people I loved. I have no excuse for what I did. She turned slightly toward where I sat. Emma, if you're listening, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I want you to know I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I finally understand the pain I caused you. The judge banged her gavel. The defendant will report to federal custody in 30 days. Just like that, it was over. I walked out of the courthouse into weak winter sunlight. My phone buzzed, Michael checking if I was okay. My rheumatologist confirming my next appointment. A friend asking about lunch next week. Normal life. Regular concerns. A future that belonged to me. Mom tried to contact me during those 30 days before prison. Letters mostly. Long, rambling apologies that circled around genuine remorse without quite landing on it. I read them all. But I didn't respond. On day 29, she tried calling one last time. I answered. Emma, she breathed. Thank you for picking up. I'm not going to visit you, I said quietly. I need you to know that. Whatever happens now, I'm not going to be part of it. I understand, she whispered. I just wanted to hear your voice one more time. Silence stretched between us. I hope someday you can forgive me, she said finally. Maybe someday I will, I replied. But that's for me to decide. On my timeline. For my healing. Not yours. I know. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Emma. I love you. I hung up without saying it back. The news coverage eventually faded. Morrison and Partners restructured and brought in new leadership. Hartman Enterprises became known as the company that supported whistleblowers. My career flourished. But Mom lost everything. Her reputation, obviously. Her consulting business, her professional network, her income. She lost her house, had to sell it to begin paying restitution. She lost most of her friends, who couldn't reconcile the woman they'd known with the criminal she'd become. She lost her freedom for 7 years. And she lost me. That was the thing she'd never expected. She'd thought our relationship was unconditional, that no matter what she did, I'd eventually forgive her because she was my mother. That biology would override betrayal. But I'd learned something important during those months of documenting and waiting and testifying. Love doesn't mean accepting abuse. Family doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for people who won't protect you. The stability she'd mocked me for needing, the career security, the financial safety, the reliable health care, the respect of colleagues, I had all of that now. Not because she'd given it to me, but because I'd fought for it despite her. I thrived at Hartman. Got promoted twice. Built a reputation for integrity and thoroughness. Made friends who knew about my lupus and never questioned my needs. I dated someone who believed me when I said I was in pain. Who drove me to doctor's appointments and didn't make me feel guilty for being sick. I built a life that didn't include her. Sometimes people asked if I felt bad about what happened to her. If I regretted my testimony. If I'd ever reconcile. The answer was complicated. I felt sad, grief for the mother-daughter relationship we'd never had. But I didn't feel guilty. She'd had choices at every step. She chose fraud over honesty. She chose money over integrity. She chose protecting herself over protecting me. I'd simply chosen myself for once. And I refused to feel guilty about that. 2 years after Mom's sentencing, my lupus went into remission. Not cured, lupus never really goes away, but managed. Under control. Livable. The medication worked. The accommodations helped. The stress reduction from leaving Morrison made a huge difference. I could function again. I could plan trips without worrying about flare-ups. I could make commitments without the fear that my body would betray me. I was healthy. Finally, truly healthy. And I was free. Free from the constant need to prove myself. Free from the voice in my head that sounded like Mom telling me I was dramatic. Free from the fear that asking for help made me weak. I'd built something real at Hartman. Michael had become a mentor and friend. I'd led 3 major financial investigations that saved clients millions. I'd spoken at conferences about corporate fraud detection and whistleblower protections. People knew my name now, but for the right reasons. My dating relationship turned serious. His name was David, and he was the first person I'd ever dated who never once questioned whether my pain was real. Who learned about lupus unprompted. Who celebrated my good days and supported my bad ones without making me feel like a burden. You're really happy, he said one evening as we cooked dinner together. Like, genuinely happy. It's beautiful to see. He was right. I was happy. Not in a loud, dramatic way, just in the quiet confidence of knowing I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I'd bought a small house. Adopted a cat. Started a garden. Normal, simple things that felt miraculous, because I'd earned them myself. Mom was 3 years into her sentence. I'd heard through relatives that she'd started a prison education program, teaching other inmates about financial literacy. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. She wrote me letters occasionally. I read them but rarely responded. She'd apologized 100 times by now, and I believed she meant it. But meaning it didn't erase what she'd done. Didn't rebuild trust. Didn't give me back the months I'd spent in pain while she called me a liar. One evening, sitting in my backyard with my laptop and a cup of tea, I decided to write something I'd been thinking about for months. I opened a blank document and started typing. This is why I'm telling you my story. I wrote for 3 hours straight. The whole story, from diagnosis to courtroom. Not for revenge or attention, but because I'd realized something important. There were others like me out there. People dismissed by their families. People whose illnesses were called dramatic. People whose pain was treated as inconvenience. People who discovered corruption and wondered if speaking up was worth the cost. They needed to know what I'd learned. Documentation matters. Truth matters. Your health matters more than anyone's comfort with it. I explained why I'd stayed quiet at first. Why I'd gathered evidence instead of confronting Mom immediately. Why I'd played defeated while building my case. Because sometimes survival means being strategic, not just honest. I explained why I'd left Morrison instead of fighting to stay. Because staying in a toxic environment while sick isn't brave, it's just more pain. Sometimes walking away is the strongest thing you can do. I explained why I'd testified. Not for revenge, but because silence protects abusers. Because fraud hurts everyone. Because I deserve to stop carrying other people's secrets. I explained why I didn't feel guilty. Because I wasn't responsible for Mom's choices. Because protecting myself wasn't the same as attacking her. Because children don't owe their parents unconditional acceptance of abuse. I wrote about the lupus, about learning to advocate for myself with doctors. About the relief of finally being believed. About the freedom that came with proper treatment and accommodation. I wrote about building a new life. About the people who'd supported me. About learning that family isn't just biology, it's who shows up for you when things get hard. And I wrote about Mom. Not with hatred, but with clarity. She'd made her choices. She'd faced consequences. And I'd moved forward without her. The final paragraph came easily. The night my test results arrived, my mother dismissed me. She laughed at my pain, questioned my truth, and set in motion a series of events that would destroy both our lives, hers through her own choices, mine temporarily through hers, but ultimately rebuilt through my own strength. She thought I wanted attention. She was wrong. I wanted dignity. I wanted health. I wanted the basic respect of being believed. And when she wouldn't give me those things, I found them myself. I paused, then typed the final sentence. That was the last time anyone ever dismissed me. I saved the document. Maybe I'd publish it someday. Maybe I'd keep it private. But writing it felt like closing a chapter that had stayed open too long. My phone buzzed. David texting that he'd picked up groceries. My doctor's office confirming my 6-month checkup. A notification that I'd been promoted again at work. Normal life. Beautiful, ordinary life. I'd survived. I'd healed. I'd built something better than what I'd lost. And that was the real ending, not Mom's punishment or my testimony, but this, me, healthy and free, living a life she'd once tried to take from me. I closed my laptop and went inside to start dinner. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new moments of ordinary grace. But tonight, I was simply grateful. Grateful to be believed. Grateful to be healthy. Grateful to be free. The rest was just details.